Welcome to tonight's Tanya class. As you all know, last week we had the opportunity, we finished the first section of Tanya, 53 chapters. We had the siyum, the completion at the Ohel of the Rebbe. And tonight is another great night because we're starting the second section of Tanya. Now, it's interesting that the second section of Tanya, which is called Shar, HaYichud, VeheEmunah, the gate, the portal to the oneness, which we'll talk about what that means, and faith, is the name of the second section of Tanya. And what's really interesting is the Alter Rebbe originally planned on making the second section first. Oh. And the first section second. So it's possible, at least in the Alter Rebbe's initial thought, that the second section of Tanya, which we're starting now, on some spiritual level is the first. And I'll soon explain to you why he had a thought, why the Alter Rebbe had a thought of making it the first. But the reality is it's the second, and there's a reason for that as well. Okay, so again, we're starting the second section of Tanya, Shar, HaYichud, VeheEmunah, the gate, the portal of the oneness of God and faith in God. And we'll talk about soon the name of the chapter. And again, the Alter Rebbe originally planned on making this the first. And the question is, why did he make the first? So we're going to give an introduction as follows. We all know that everything that exists, will exist. The source of everything is what? God. Specifically, if you had the proper magnifying glass, if you look at God's name, we're talking about the powerful name of God. Which is the powerful name of God? The Yud, the Hey, and the Vav, the powerful name of God. In there you have everything. And as we went through many times, we discussed the way the Sefirot are in there and so on and so forth. So everything that exists, if you take Yud Kei Vav Kei, you will find it within the Sefirot. You'll find it within the human being. We discussed that the Yud is the head, right? The Hey is the hands, the Vav is the body, the Hey is the feet, and so on and so forth. So the Tanya has 4 sections to it. There are 4 sections to the Tanya. So you already see there's a connection. 4 sections of Tanya, and how many letters in God's name? 4, right? So what's the connection between the 4 letters of God's name and the 4 sections of Tanya? So it's interesting is that there's a concept in Kabbalah that says you can either go Milmata Lamaila, from the below above. And when we say below above, we're not talking physical, we're talking spiritually. It means less godly energy, more godly energy. Or we go from above below, that means more godly energy and less godly energy. So the Alter Rebbe's Tanya is structured actually where originally the plan was that it was going to go backwards. In other words, God's name is spelled Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. So the first section of Tanya, which again would have been Shar, HaYichud, VeheEmunah, refers to the last Hey of God's name. What's the idea of what's the connection of the last Hey of God's name? The last Hey of God's name is in the Sefirot, is referring to the sphere of Malchut, of kingdom. So the last Hey of God's name is Malchut, is kingdom, and the section Shar, HaYichud, VeheEmunah deals about the kingdom of God, because it speaks about what? The oneness of God. The oneness of God, where everything is really one. And again, when we say one, we don't mean 1 versus 2 versus 3. One, we mean the only existence that exists is God and godliness, and that's obviously referring to the kingdom of God. And therefore the Shar, HaYichud, VeheEmunah is referring to what? The last Hey of God's name. The next section, again, we're going the order the way originally the Alter Rebbe planned it. So Likutei Amarim would have been the second section, which the one we just finished, and that is the Vav of God's name. The Vav of God's name is referring to the emotions, because we know ultimately what is the essence. If you had to ask, what is the essence of the first section of Tanya, is where the Alter Rebbe gives us the tools to have a relationship with God, not just up here, that's a given, and that's important, but more importantly that the intellect should permeate all our emotions, and we should be Jews that are alive, that we should be, in English I think it's called living Judaism. living Judaism should be alive, and living Jews, we should be alive, not just like walking robots. Oh, I got to go do this, I got to go do that, I got to check this off the list, check that off the list, this mitzvah, and again, you have to do the mitzvot. 100% you have to do them. No, don't get the wrong idea. Absolutely, you have to do every single mitzvah, and you have to stay away from God for transgressing. You have to study Torah and pray, etc. But the essence of Chabad, and specifically Tanya, is to teach you how to be on fire, to be enthused, how to have simcha, how to have joy, how to have love for God, how to be in awe for God. These are all strong emotions, but again, the emotions aren't wild emotions, because you can have wild emotions. Like, for example, it's called when someone is just totally, like, out of control. But we're not talking about wild emotions, we're talking about inspired emotions. Inspired emotions are meaningful, are real, and have a certain class and finesse, spiritual class. And the idea of the section of Tanya is to be emotionally alive, enthused, as you would say. That is the Vav. So we went from Hey Vav, then you have the second Hey, which we're going backwards with the third Hey, but the second Hey in God's name, and that is referring to the idea of Bina. And this third section of Tanya is basically called the Igeres HaTshuva, where the Alter teaches us how to connect to God, to returning to God through the idea of Tshuva, which is, again, the idea of Bina, more of an expansive relationship with God. And the last section in Tanya is called Igeret HaKodesh, holy letters. And holiness is the Yud, the first Yud of God's name. Now, so that's why originally the plan was that the second section should have been the first, because it would bring the Hey Vav, Hey Yud in that order. But for whatever reason, the Alter chose to switch it, and maybe after this class you'll appreciate why possibly the Alter chose to switch it. And you'll also see the way that actually the second section really should come first, and we'll see at the end of the class, we'll explain why, even though it should come first, the Alter chose what to put it at the end. Okay, so the Alter begins off as we're going to learn today, not the actual first chapter, but we're going to learn the introduction, just like there's an introduction for the first section of Tanya, which we had a separate class on it. We are going to have today a class on the introduction to the second section of Tanya, the way it's printed in the book, and again, in reality, it should have been first. So the Alter opens up the second section of Tanya based on a verse in King Solomon's writings, Mishlei, and the King Solomon writes as follows. A verse in King Solomon's writings. Chanoich lanar al pidarko, gam ki yaskin layasur mimenu. So what is the King Solomon saying? That if you have a student, you have a lad, you have a youth, so educate him according to his level, so that when he gets older, it will always remain with him. That's what King Solomon says. So again, the Alter is not coming to create a new verse, but he's saying, let's take that verse and let's go diving. We'll take some spiritual diving into that verse. He says, let's try to understand what the verse is saying. The verse is saying is to go ahead, educate someone according to their level. Now what does that mean? That means very simple. Educate them on their level. Like, for example, if you have a little child that never learned Aleph Beis, you teach them the Aleph Beis. Once they know the Aleph Beis, then you teach them how to read, and then you teach them Chumash, then you teach them Rashi, then you teach them other commentaries, and meditation, and Kabbalah, and Mishnah. As you grow older, you advance in your studies. Now, could you imagine, the Alter says you take, and I'm explaining to you my words, obviously what the Alter was saying is, can you imagine you take someone that knows the Aleph Beis, and knows how to read, and knows already Chumash, and knows mysticism, you say, come, let's learn Aleph Beis.
He already knows?
He knows it already, right?
Yeah.
So the Alter asks the question, so what are you saying? Educate the youth on his level, so that when he gets older, it won't wear off. When he gets older, you want him to be on to bigger and better things. So what does it mean when he gets older, he won't forget? So it's not really ultimately you want him to study. You really only want to study mysticism, but really you don't want him to know the alphabets. He needs to know the alphabets. Why is that like a full study? So the Alter uses this to explain that just like, for example, when it comes to mitzvot, so we know that every mitzvah that we do, before we do it, there's a process which is called a practice. So for example, let's say someone is becoming bar mitzvah. So when someone becomes bar mitzvah, you have an obligation, for example, for a male to put on tefillin every day. Now, can you imagine 13 years old? Okay, we're putting on tefillin now. Put on the tefillin with him and just now put it on every day. How's he going to do it? I mean, you have to practice. So we have a custom, and there's different customs, that people have, but the Chabad custom is that for 2 months before, every single day you practice. For the first month you practice without a blessing, you're just practicing the technicality how to do it. The second month, already you practice how to put it on, plus you practice the blessing. So when you do it, the day of your mitzvah, you know how to put it on, and you know how to make the blessing. Practice. And any other mitzvah, just practice. Before you do any mitzvah, you practice. So that's when it comes to technical mitzvot. What did we learn in the first section on Tanya? What is a spiritual mitzvah? To have love for God and to have awe for God. So there's just like there's real love and there's real awe, the Alter Rebbe says there's also a practice type of love. There's like I'm not going to use the word make-believe, there's a practice love and there's a practice awe. What is the difference between practice love and real love? So the Alter Rebbe says as follows. What's the ultimate in love? The ultimate in love, the highest level.
Share it. Connection with God.
Very good. The ultimate in love is where you're one with God. The Alter Rebbe uses a word, which is a very heavy description, and it says you almost have kalois hanefesh. Your soul is leaving your body. Like you're so yearning to have that relationship with God that literally there's nothing that's holding you back. It means if your soul left your body, so be it. You so want to be with God. You so want to be with God that your soul leaves your body, so what? What's more important to you is not your body. If your body is more important to you, if your house is more important to you, if your career is more important to you, if your job is more important to you, your car, but whatever the material is more important to you, so you're not going to want to leave God. You'll go visit Him in synagogue, whether it's once a year, some people, right? Some people once a month, some people once a week, once a day, 3 times a day. You show up, hey God, nice seeing you, I'll be back, and my next obligation, depending on how you like to observe that, right? Or if you study Torah, okay, guess what? I'm going to spend now an hour with God. I haven't spoken to him in a while. You sit down, you have a study session with God, okay, now I'm going to go do my thing, right? Which is not your thing, and let's keep the two separate, right? Okay, so that is not kalois hanefesh. Because why? Because your soul, your body is important to you, your materialistic needs are important to you, your personal agenda is important to you, and you have an agenda with God, and you want to have a relationship with God too. Kalois hanefesh means I just want to become one with God. I don't look at the watch. And there's never a time when I'm not cleaving to God. That doesn't mean you don't work. And that doesn't mean you don't have a job. And that doesn't mean you don't eat and you don't sleep. And you don't have a family and you don't do activities. But that means that everything I do, kol masecha, everything I do, l'shem shemayim. It means I'm working, why? To earn money, to be able to live a life that I could serve God. I do have a house so I can invite people to my house and do mitzvot in the house and so on and so forth, right? And live a nice, godly life. I have a car so I can go to shul, I can go to take my kids to school, whatever you need, material. But again, the mindset, more than a mindset, your soul mission and vision as life is kol masecha. Kol means everything. Kol means, when we say kol, it means everything. And we mean everything, we mean what? Everything. Not some of the things, everything. Kol masecha, everything I'm doing is l'shem shemayim, is for God. And that is called...
goes with us wherever we go, whatever we do.
Exactly, wherever you go, whatever we do. And that is called kol masecha l'shem shemayim, and in spiritual terms it's called kalois hanefesh. My soul just wants to cleave to God. So obviously it's more noticeable when you pray and you study and you do mitzvot. But even when you're doing mundane things, you're going to the store, you're going, obviously there must be a godly purpose why you're going, because you're going to buy things either for the Chabad house or for your house. You're making a meal for Shabbat, or you're inviting guests, or you go to buy kosher. The point, everything you're doing has to have a godly channel and a godly intention, and that's basically called kalois hanefesh. Now, that is A, the channel. B, the way you do it, and this shows whether God's important to you or you're important to you. When you have kalois hanefesh on a high level where you love God, everything you're doing is what? With a big Let's practice. A big smile. Right? With joy, which is external, and pleasure, which is internal. So everything that you're doing, and since you're doing everything for God, and you're doing that 24/7, so 24/7 you have a huge smile, right? And you're feeling a deep, relaxed pleasure. Kalois hanefesh, you're yearning to be with God with joy and pleasure. Now, the reality is, who wants to be on that level? Who doesn't want to be in that level?
Yeah.
Now, but the reality is, in order to get to that level, there's a price you pay for everything. You want a car, you got to pay for it. You want a house, you got to pay for it, right? You want to buy some food, you got to pay for it. There's a price. What's the price? So the Alter spells out. The price is very, very simple. You have to transform your body. We don't mean the physical body only, but we refer to anything which is materialistic and coarse, you have zero interest in. Because you can't be putting one foot in this mountain and one foot in the other mountain and expect to be in two places at one time. It's either you're cleaving to God and you totally let go of any attachment, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual attachment to anything physical. Doesn't mean you're not living in the physical world, but it has zero value to you. What's important to you is God and godliness. What's important to you is the relationship. So you have to be able to get rid of any attachment to the materialistic coarse world. And again, to make it clear, it doesn't mean that you're living out in the mountains. You're living in a real world with a house and a car and people and food and drink, all that stuff. But there's no attachment to it. That means if you didn't have it, you'll be just as fine. And if you have it, you're grateful because God gave you an opportunity to serve Him through this. And if God doesn't give it to me, it means He wants me to serve me another way. But ultimately, it's all about what? I want to cleave to God. And I do it with joy and gladness. And in order to get that, the price you're paying for it, that you have to detach. Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes we get caught up with some narishkeit, right? We all know what narishkeit is. It's fine, right? Look up in the Webster's dictionary. It's in there, right? Narishkeit. Okay. Foolishness, exactly. So that, price number one. The altar was not finished. There's a big price. I mean, you're happy to do it because if you want to cleave to God, you don't care what the price is, right? You pay anything. You're willing to give everything up. So one is what? You have to detach from materialism. Again, the attachment to it. The second thing is you have to study a lot of Torah. Because think about it. I want to cleave to God. How are you cleaving to God? Saying it's not going to get you too far. So you have to literally sit and study Torah. Whether it's Chumash, whether it's Mishnah, whether it's Talmud, whether it's Kabbalah, whether it's Medrash, whatever it may be. You have to study lots and lots of Torah. Because think about it, if you're detached, materialism doesn't mean much to you, so what are you doing? I mean, we have 24 hours a day. It's a lot of time, right? Especially now that the summer days are very, very long, right? So we have a lot of time. So you have to be studying a lot of Torah. Literally studying Torah. Quantitatively. And obviously qualitatively as well. Second price. There's three prices. The third price, you got to do a lot of mitzvot. Anytime you can do a mitzvah, you do another mitzvah. Whether it's, a kashrut, Shabbat, mezuzat, tefillin, charity, loving another human being, having all for God, whatever the mitzvah is. So you have to be busy with developing that relationship. So if you're willing to, if you want to cleave to God, and you do cleave to God, and you detach from materialism, and you study an abundance amount of Torah, and you do as many mitzvahs as you can, then the Alter says, you don't decide, God decides to give you a present. And guess what? Could you bribe God? There's no way. If you earned it, you're going to get it. The good thing is if you earned it, you're getting it. No one's going to hold it back from you. We're living in a world today, you can work for something and somehow someone, we're not going to, right, is going to stop you from getting it. Not with God. If you earned it, you're going to get it. That's the pro. Not how much it's a con, but the reality is if you didn't earn it, you're not getting it. You're not going to somehow skip the line with God. If you don't have the kalois nefesh, you don't cleave to God, and you're attached to materialism, you don't study a lot of Torah and mitzvot, you ain't getting the prize. What is the prize? What is the prize? So the Alter is very simple. You know what the prize is? We all have a Neshama. We all have a godly soul. Now, we know there's 5 levels to the soul. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. I started from the bottom. Nefesh is basically, everyone has a nefesh. Because without a nefesh, you're not in this world. So nefesh is basically the basic operating system, or the basic soul that every one of us have. In order to, if you're alive, you have a nefesh. Your nefesh is working. If you transform yourself a little more, then what? Then you have a ruach. You're more spirited. You're more into spirituality. You're more into something spiritual versus something physical. Now, generally speaking, nefesh, ruach, neshama is the internal part of the soul that we can connect to. Chaya and Yechida is part which is above us, and that part we cannot connect. That's much deeper. That's usually his gift. Here the Alter says that nefesh and ruach is one that we have access to, and that's one we can connect to. Neshama, the Alter says here, this is makif, which it hovers over us, and that's like, whoa, when someone connects to his neshama, when neshama gets activated, now that is the gift that God's give you, and then you can obviously experience the greatest love for God, and that comes as a gift. So the gift is that your neshama gets ignited, and once your neshama gets ignited, that's when you're like flying. That's when you're really flying. Now, flying with what? With love for God. So in other words, the first level of love, which is the higher level, and that's ultimately that's the love that we don't want, is to have a level that we're totally cleaving to God, not attached to anything physical or materialistic, studying an abundance amount of Torah, doing many mitzvot, and then what happens is, what gets brightened in our life is not only the nefesh and ruach, like everyone has, but then we have the level of what? Of the neshama. That's obviously the highest level of love. And that's the place we all want to get to. And it takes a lot of work, as the Alter says, because we have to detach materialism, study Torah, and do mitzvot. Okay, that's something which is the higher level. But then the Alter says, ultimately, that's something which God's either going to give you the gift or not going to give you the gift. You have no control over it. But then there's a lower level of love. What is the lower level of love? The lower level of love is the Alter brings down from the Torah, where God says that we should. God commands us to love God. So the Alter says, how can God command you to love God? And he used the term in action. How can you love God? So the Alter says what God is referring to there is not the higher level of love, because that's a gift. Either we're going to get it or not. There's a lower level of love which comes through meditation. Through meditation. When a person meditates, then you can achieve love. So the Alter explains, how do you meditate? What do you meditate on? So he gives two meditations. One meditation, he says, is very simple. The fact is that the nature of every human being is that they love who? Someone else or themselves?
Themselves.
Very good. Excellent. That's the nature of every human being. The nature of every human being, they love themselves. Now, so the meditation goes very simple, generally speaking. Since you love yourself, who created you? God. So ultimately, who are you?
A creation of God. A child of God.
You are God. Not God that you should start bossing people around. That's part of God. We mean, but who godly. Are you? Godly. God created you, and the truth is, if God did not create you, you wouldn't be. So God created you, and you are. Who maintains you every single second that you should be alive?
God.
God. So your existence, that you exist, is thanks to the fact that God created you, and God maintains you. So therefore the fact that you're here is what? It's thanks to God. So guess what? Now let's go back again. Every person naturally loves themselves. So if you love yourself, really who are you loving? God. You're loving God. If you think for a moment that really you are created by God, and really God is who you are, so therefore who are you loving? God. You're loving God. When you say, I love myself, what does that mean? So you can look at it superficially, right? Externally. Or you can go, no, I love the fact that I'm alive, I'm healthy, and I'm alive and healthy. That's God doing that. And therefore I love God. That's one level of meditation. That's a global meditation, a general meditation. That's a very easy meditation. You take for a moment and say, oh my gosh, you know what? I love myself, right? You look in the mirror, not too excessively. You love yourself. What do you see? You see God. God knows God's creation, And therefore, I love God for making me who I am. Then the Alter says, let's take it even further. The fact is, who is God? What is God? God is the infinite God. God's the infinite God. He is everything. He is everything. This God that's everything, guess what? As busy as He is, He made time for me. What am I in the big scheme of things? Even a little smaller than that. No, think about it. Percentage-wise of how many people in the world, how many things in the world, we're like not even a speck. And this God that's infinite, who has plenty of things to do. He has to create the world and maintain the world every single second. And He has billions of specks right all over the world. Because not only does He have to create and maintain humans, there's animals, there's trees, there's forests. He has a whole industry of food He has to feed us. Believe me, the food is not coming from the grocery store. God creates it and maintains it. And then He has to maintain the earth. And He went, this God, stopped what He was doing from His busy schedule. He came down to Egypt when we were slaves. And He took me and you, every one of us, out of Egypt. Had He not taken us out of Egypt, guess what? We would still be slaves today. That's a fact. Think about it. Why wouldn't we not be slaves today if we were in Egypt? So this God came and took us out. So guess what? Why did God do that? Why did God take us out of Egypt? Because He was bored one day? WhatsApp went down, so he couldn't be bored, he wasn't busy? Why did He do that?
Because He loves us.
Very good, exactly. Not because He was bored for a second, because He loves us. And therefore, as busy as He was, He what?
And He has a purpose.
And He has a purpose, yes, but the ultimate reason is because He loves us. Because He loves us, He has a purpose for us. So because He loves us, He stopped what He was doing, and He pushed everything aside and said, guess what? I got to go and take my people that I have a purpose for and have a mission for, who I love, and I got to take them out of Egypt. So God loves us. Now Kabbalah has a rule. This is the rule of Kabbalah. If somebody loves you, you will by default, and you have no control, not to love the person, you will automatically love the person. If you love somebody, whether you think about them, they will feel that you're thinking about them. When you do something for them, how much more so, they will feel it. And as much as they resist, at some point they will break. Why? Because you know, what's the most powerful thing in this world is love. And if you throw love and you shower with love, guess what happens? Love comes right back. Comes right back. Comes right back. So God went ahead and loved us and took us out of Egypt, and therefore we love Him. What's the problem? The problem is that sometimes we don't think about the way He loves us. So we're like trying to be distracted. The only reason why we're not in fiery love for God, because we're distracted. We're distracted with our cell phones, with our emails, with our texts, with our friends, or whatever, with our narishkeit, and like, a lot of things, right? Materialistic pursuits. But if we stop for a moment and say, okay, you know what? Meditation time. And you say, oh my gosh, this infinite God, who's very busy, stopped, took me out of Egypt. Oh my gosh. What's the natural reaction? I love Him. Now, so how did that come about? It came about through me stopping and meditating on the way God loves me. And because I stopped, and therefore I'll have to love back for Him. Now, and if you give a look in the Chumash, in Deuteronomy, that's what Moshe Rabbeinu tried to instill in the Jewish people. And he gives the history. The way God created everything. We were in Egypt and God came and took us out. And God loves us. And therefore Moses says, therefore we have to love God. So the question is, how can you command someone to love God? And the answer is, sure, you can command someone to love God. You can't command to love God because love's a feeling. Like in the first level of, you can't command someone to love God. But you can command someone to stop and think and meditate. And you don't have to meditate too deeply. The fact that first level of meditation, God created me, God maintains me, and God is me, and therefore you naturally love Him. And more specifically, when you think about the way God literally shows his love for you because he bailed us out, and he continues to bail us out. By the way, it wasn't just a bailout of Egypt. There have been plenty of bailouts: national bailout, international bailouts, national bailouts, family bailouts, personal bailouts. There's bailouts all throughout our life. And matter of fact, probably if you think about it even simply and deeply, you don't have to go too deep. Every single day he bails us out. Our thoughts, our actions, some of our words,
every breath.
Every breath, exactly. Now, so we have two levels of love, the Alter Rebbe says. One level is what? Is a gift from above, and that we have you can't command someone because either God's going to give us the love or not going to give it to us. But the second level that comes through meditation, that we have a command to meditate. If and when we meditate, you know what happens? We love God. Exactly. Now, what happens is, the Alter Rebbe says, he quotes again from King Solomon, Mishlei, that it says that a Tzadik, a righteous man, will fall 7 times before he gets up. So just in case you fell, if it's not 7, relax. You have a few more to go. So you fell 5, Rabbi, I fell 5 times. 2 more to go. 2 more to go, right? If you're only 3, you got 4 more to go. So the point is, even at Tzadik, before he goes to the next level, he goes through, in Hebrew it's called a nefilah, he falls. He falls. That's the reality. Why? Because the fact is that God make us like robots, like angels, or are we shakers and movers? We're shakers and movers. Shakers and movers fall. That's the reality. Guess what? You don't want to fall? Do nothing. But do nothing, you're not going anywhere in life. If you want to go somewhere in life, you're going to fall. And the rule is 7 fallings. You got to fall 7 times. Now, so what happens is, but again, even though you're falling, but think about it. Let's say you start out here and you start climbing and then you fall. But you're still ahead of the game with someone that didn't move. He's still down here. So even though you fell, but you fell in a much higher level. So the falling is not a bad thing. Meanwhile, you moved up. So you fell a little bit. So what? But you're still way ahead of someone who didn't move. And as you go higher, guess what? You fall. And as you fall, guess what? You get up again and you keep on going higher. So ultimately, you're really going higher. Now, so what happens is like this. A tzaddik, someone that basically detaches from materialism, studies a lot of Torah, does a lot of mitzvot, right? He's doing great. And he gets this love from God. God gives him a gift. But guess what we just said before? You got to this level. That's good for yesterday.
He has to fall again.
He has to grow. He has to grow again. In the growth, they'll be falling again. You don't have to fall first. First you started moving. Once you start moving, then you fall again. Now, so what happens when you fall? When you fall, do you have the love? The high level of love, or you don't have it? You lost it. Because you're going through a falling right now. So what happens when you're going through even when it's tzaddik, when someone is in the higher level, when you go through your fall, what happens when you go through the fall? No love. How can you be without love? So that's what the Alter Rebbe says. How did we start the class? He brings down from King Solomon to educate the youth when you're young, so that when you get older, you'll always have it with you. What's the Alter Rebbe explaining? Yes, ultimately, we're talking now about the idea of having love for God, the being in awe of God. Ultimately, you want to have the greatest love, which comes from detaching from materialism and studying Torah and doing mitzvot. That's the highest level of love, and that's a gift from God. But as you go through life, there's times when that love is not vibrant. The time that love is not burning within you because you're going through the ups and downs of life, or specifically the down in the up zone. In the up zone, you're going through a down spell. In the down spell, so you're lacking that. How are you going to have love? So the Alter Rebbe says, guess what never leaves you? What never leaves you is the love based on meditation. Because even in a down spell, even when a person is going through a challenge, even when a person is being tested, you can stop right in the middle of the test and say, guess what? Who am I? God created me. And if God created me, I love myself. I love God. So the love comes right in. Even in the down spell, the love comes right in. Or you say, hey, God bailed me out, right? God loves me, and if I love Him. So even when you're going through, you're not on that high level of love, the lower level of love will always be there for you. The lowest level of love, the jump start will always be there for you. And that's why the Alter says, to educate, even on the lower level that comes through meditation, don't just shoot for the higher level. Because the higher level, when you'll have it, it's going to be amazing. But there's times when you're not going to have it, and then you're going to be empty. So you never want to be an empty. You always want to have a spare battery. Amen. So the spare battery is the meditation one. And the supercharged battery is the one that comes from the gift. Now, so those are the two levels of love, which obviously they're both important. One obviously is the higher level, which is great to be on the high. But the other one's important because that you have control over, because that you can meditate, that you have full control to activate and bring out. But then the Alter Rebbe finishes off the introduction to this section of Tanya, and he says, guess what? In order to achieve, whether it's the high level or the low level, as an introduction and as a foundation to any love, in order to have any love, you know what you need? You can't even start loving without this. You ready? And this is the introduction to the second section of Tanya. In order to have any love, high level or low level love, the Alter says you need one thing. You need to have faith, pure faith, in the oneness and the unity of God. In other words, without pure faith in the unity, in the unity and the oneness of God, love doesn't have a foundation. It's not going to be solid. In other words, first and foremost, one has to have what? Faith, pure faith, in the fact that the oneness, you know what oneness means? Oneness means that the only existence that exists in this world, from right to left, front to back, top to bottom, and anything, any person, place, or thing, the only real existence is God. Once you get that pat down solid and becomes internalized, then you can start loving. But if you're lacking a real faith, pure faith, in the Alter Rebbe's language, in the unity and oneness of God, love is not going to work. It's not going to stick. Because what's the whole idea of love? I love God. Why? Why do I love God? Because He created me, He maintains me, and God bailed me out. Who's God?
But I'm part of that oneness.
Right. So in order to have that love, you need to believe in the oneness. For example, you're studying Torah and you're doing mitzvot and you're detaching from materialism because you realize ultimately it's all about God. So if you're lacking in the foundation of the unity and oneness of God, and if you're lacking in that faith, how are you going to be able to have love?
That's right.
So therefore, the Alter Rebbe says, what's really important is, as a foundation of everything, unity and oneness of God. And that's where this section of Tanya, the second section of Tanya, is going to go into in depth. And we're going to study in depth. The Alter Rebbe is going to teach us, what does it mean to have unity of God? What does it mean, the oneness of God? And that will be a foundation. Now, that's obviously the reason why the Alter Rebbe wanted to put the second section of Tanya first. Because think about it. What do you need first?
Faith.
Faith in what? In the unity and oneness of God. The second section of Tanya speaks about the unity and oneness of God. So in theory, not in theory, in practicality, that has to go first. Because the first thing is you need unity, you need oneness and unity of God. And then you go to the second section and deals with love and the passion for God. That's the proper order, the way it should have been. But the Alter Rebbe chose to put the first section first, which deals with the love for God. And now that we're on fire with the love, he says, by the way, guess what? Hold tight. We got to go back to the foundation and make sure the foundation is solid and put in the unity and oneness of God. Why the Alter Rebbe chose at the end to switch it around, even though the order should have been the other way, I don't know. But I do know is that this is extremely important. But now that we're fired up and we realize how important it is to love God, and we realize all the levels of love, now we need to really focus in and to really study and comprehend and become one with the unity and oneness of God, and then our love will really last forever.